This
Everybody.
conference will now be recorded.
All right, let me go ahead and start by reading the declaration, and then we'll call the meeting to order. Due to the nature of the declaration of a state of emergency due to the novel coronavirus or COVID-19, and pursuant to Code 2.2-3708.2, this meeting is to be held by electronic communications via the web platform GoToMeeting. The catastrophic nature of this declared emergency makes it impractical and unsafe to assemble a quorum in a single location, and the purpose of this meeting is to discuss or transact the business statutorily required or necessary to continue operations of the public body. And with that, I'll call the meeting to order. Stacy, could you go ahead and do the roll call for us?
Stacy, you're on mute.
Mr. Chair, this is Jordan Chandler. I can jump in and do roll call if Stacy's having technology issues.
Okay, sir, that works.
Perfect. From Stafford County, Mr. Chair Alex Oziak.
Here.
Brandon Brown.
I'm here.
Brian Council. Jason Towery.
Here.
From Spotsylvania County, Mr. Paul Agnello.
Here.
Mr. Rodney White.
Here.
Mr. Jacob Pashwick. Mr. Leon Hughes. From the city of Fredericksburg, Miss Jamie Jackson.
Here.
Mr. Mike Craig.
Here.
From King George County, Mr. Nick Miner. Miss Kimberly Wilson.
Here.
From Caroline County, Mr. Mike Fincham. Mr. Craig Pennington. From Fred Regional Transit, Mr. Aiden Cork.
Here.
Mr. Craig Reed. From the Virginia Department of Public Transportation, VDOT, Miss Michelle Shropshire. Mr. Stephen Haynes.
Here.
Mr. Jim Ponticello. Mr. Dan Grinnell. From the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, Miss Sierra Williams. Mr. Todd Horsley. From Virginia Railway Express, VRE, Miss Christine Hefner. From Federal Highway Administration, FHWA, Mr. Richard Duran. From the Potomac and Rappahannock Transportation Commission, PRTC, Dr. Bob Schneider.
Here.
Mr. Joe Stainsby.
Here.
From GW Ride Connect, Miss Kate Gibson.
Here.
Miss Lee Anderson.
Here.
And that is all, Mr. Chair. Attendance has been taken and a quorum is present.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Jordan. All right, next we'll move on to item number 3, which is approval of the May 3rd TAC agenda. Does anyone have any changes or edits to the agenda? All right, well, hearing none, I'll make a motion to go ahead and approve today's agenda. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, agenda is approved. Next, we'll move on to item number 4, which is approval of the April 12th TAC meeting minutes. Again, does anyone have any edits or changes they'd like to see made to the meeting minutes? All right, well, hearing none, I'll go ahead and make a motion then to approve the April 12th TAC meeting minutes. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Meeting minutes approved. Next, we'll do item number 5, which is review of the April 19th Policy Committee meeting. Ian?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I won't belabor this because I know many of you do attend the policy committee, but we did make a presentation about the U.S. Census Bureau's proposed changes to the urban areas calculations. The RFP draft was approved by the policy committee. We made a presentation on the funding allocations, the initial funding for CMAQ. We looked at the long-range transportation plan and the roadway evaluation measures were approved. We made an initial presentation on transit, TDM, and active transportation prioritization methodologies. And then a number of documents were put out for a round of public comments, and those included the draft 2045 Lrtp amendment, the Transportation Alternatives Funding Update, the TIP update, and our new UPWP update. And Stacey Find also presented her new document, which is a combination of former FAMPO documents, which we're now calling the Community Engagement and Equity Plan. The update to that was also put out for public comment. So all of those things were approved for public comment, and they're out currently getting public comment where we can. So that's basically just a very quick overview of what happened at the policy committee, and I think I'd like to keep it short like that. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Ian. Does anyone have any questions? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to item number 6, public comment. Now, I know Stacey mentioned she's received 1 public comment already. I don't know if she's still having technical difficulties or is able to read that comment.
Can you guys hear me now? I think my audio has been resolved.
Yep, we got you.
Great. Okay, just 1 comment to make you aware of. Adriana Giddens, she's a UMW student and an advocate for people with a disability, and she shared concerns via phone call about the lack of paratransit in the FAMPO area. She expressed the difficulties people with visual impairments experience when attempting to ride Fred. And that concludes the public comments that we've received.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Thanks, Stacey. And at this time, are there any additional members from the public online who'd like to make any comments? All right, well, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move right into the discussion and action items. Starting off with 7A, which is the Lafayette Boulevard multi-study update.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. This project has been resuscitated from some months of the doldrums last year and is now well on the way to making progress and hopefully completion soon. We've had a stakeholder meeting with the consultant and VDOT. Remember, this project was taken over by VDOT in terms of management last year, and VDOT is still managing this particular project. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail, just to alert you that the project is still continuing, and a further round of comments and suggested alternatives were suggested at that last stakeholder meeting, which are now being studied by the consultant. and a revised presentation will be prepared by the consultant. We await a date and time for the next stakeholder meeting, which will then present those amendments and suggested alternatives to the stakeholder meeting. I'm hoping once that wraps up that we will have an update available for the TAC. So I'm hoping to bring this to the TAC once that next stakeholder meeting has been arranged.
Hey, yeah, Ian, this is Paul Niello from Spotsylvania. What's your best guess on when the study recommendations will be known and when the study will be completed?
Paul, that's a very good question. I'd like to ask VDOT to answer that, simply because we as the FAMPO staff are not managing this particular project. And so because we're not managing it, I'm not really in charge of the timelines. I think that's up to VDOT. So I don't know whether Stephen or one of the other team from VDOT wants to propose an answer to Paul's question.
Sure. We don't have the absolute date of completion, because as you know, when you have a stakeholder meeting, and Ian already pointed out, we took a lot more input in, and so we have to kind of sort through what we're able to do within our scope, budget, and schedule, and what we're not able to do, and how does that affect schedule. So we're sort of in the middle of that, because we did have quite a bit of input. I can tell you this, there was a very good suggestion that came from Spotsylvania County regarding a two-way pair. We aren't actually able to study that as a part of this study, but what we're doing is we're making certain that whatever is done in the future to look into that particular situation and the possibility of that type of design will not be precluded by anything. We want to look at Lafayette Boulevard in such a way that whatever comes about from that in the future would be covered well within this study. So we kind of made some flexibility there, but we weren't able to actually go back, for example, and totally study that suggested alternative, because it's out of scope. So it's things like that. We're trying to work out just what we can and cannot do, but the consultant has their marching orders, and we'll be getting back to you real soon.
All right, is there any other questions regarding the Lafayette Boulevard multimodal study? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to item 7B, which is a 5307 discussion. And sure, maybe some of you remember April's GWRC meeting back on the 24th. The policy committee there had a discussion regarding the 5307 funding that was available for allocations. There was a little bit over $3 million that's in previous year funding that was available, in addition to about I think 3.6 million in CARES Act funding that's available for operation expenses. GWRC indicated some of this 5307 money obviously was available for allocations. And you probably recall also that back in March, after they had their meeting, they put out a call for different entities to go ahead and submit their 5307 eligible projects. So back there at the meeting they had on April 24th, they went ahead and provided a summary of those eligible projects to the policy committee along with their respective costs. I believe a motion was made to go ahead and allocate the 2.8 million in 5307 to go ahead and allocate that to the VRE station improvements at Brook and Leland to replace that CMAQ funding and make it available to FAMPO. However, after a bunch of discussion seen back and forth between the policy committee members, a substitute motion was finally brought to the floor and voted upon, which would take that $2.8 million in previous year's 5307 funding, and I believe it allocated about 1.4 million to the Leland Road VRE station to free up the 1.4 million in CMAQ on that project. $40,000 of 5307 went to the FAMPO East-West mobility study. Another about a little over $750,000 was allocated to Fred for a radio and emergency management system. And then I believe they said, the balance of that 2.8 million, they were looking to put that on the Brook Road VRE station improvements, which comes to about 608,000 if I'm doing my math correct. So with that $3 million allocation and previous funding, with the 2.8 now they've allocated, that leaves a balance of about $283,000 left in 5307 in previous year funding that can still be allocated to eligible projects. And so that's kind of the end of my update on 5307. I know some of the policy committee members did indicate that they were kind of looking to the TAC to provide some direction possibly on how these 5307 funds should be allocated. So in that case, you know, it's not really an action item today, but I'd like to see if we could kind of make some kind of motion here to, you know, say, hey, the TAC is on board with, you know, allocating whatever's left in that previous year balance, that $283,000, and see if we could allocate that to the Brook Road VRE station improvement project to help free up that CMAQ money, so we can use that to kind of backfill, you know, FAMPO projects where we've lost previous year funding. So with that, I'll open up to the group for any kind of further discussion.
Hey, Alex.
Go ahead, Kate.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, this is Kate. I just wanted to clarify those numbers. So the GWC board actually voted to allocate the full $3,083,000 and change that was available. So they allocated the $40,000 to the East-West Mobility Study, a little over $750,000 to the Fred Radio project, and then the $1.4 million to Leland. And then I have that they allocated $891,900 to the Brook Station improvements.
All right, well, thanks for that clarification, Kate. Yeah, it's kind of difficult to understand a little bit. I was even going back this morning and kind of listening through some of the meeting minutes and trying to understand if they were just voting on the 2.8 or the full balance. So if they did the full balance, that's even better. I don't think any further, you know, action is necessary from FAMPO to provide direction then to GWRC.
Yes, that was my understanding of the vote. So thanks for letting me clarify that.
Yeah, Alex, this is Paul Aniolo from Spotsylvania. I had a couple kind of comments and thoughts. I'll say there was definitely some good progress made at GWC at the last meeting. We think, though, there could be some other opportunities to maximize the utilization of 5307 funding on regional projects. And basically, here are some of the ideas, basically with the Brook Station project, to allocate the remaining $500,000 or so for that, for the 5307 funding to free up the CMAQ funding on that using FY22 funding. Another kind of option, basically, which would help GWC and FAMPO would be to allocate some funding annually for FAMPO and GWC transit planning and studies. I know there was a proposal to do that for $50,000, I think, at last month's meeting. We had basically in our comments to GWC advocated for $125,000 a year for that, but that's an option which could help both FAMPO and GWC staffing going forward. A third option basically is with a CMAQ basically candidate project for FY22-27 allocations for the leased parking spaces beyond the 105 space cap on the existing UPC 87764 project, to use 5307 for that instead of CMAQ. This is something we did not realize was possible when we submitted our projects to FAMPO for the call projects back in March. So that would save potentially $22,185 starting in FY27. The last idea is basically this involves with Fred Transit. They had a couple of transit projects they submitted for CMAQ and STBG consideration for 3 new Fred buses and then for a trolley bus. Those could be submitted to GWC for 5307 consideration. And I'll say certainly for the Fred Transit bus, it seems like that would definitely be eligible. I guess the trolley bus would maybe need potentially to be a question to PRTC to see if that would also be eligible. But it seems like those would be some good opportunities to basically use that 5307 funding in cases where basically CMAQ or STBG doesn't necessarily have to be used.
Mr. Chair, I think in terms of FY22, we should ask Kate, who's on the line, to weigh in on that. I believe that she wants to get an annual process that is objective and allows people to put forward proposals every year. But it's up to GWRC to decide how they want to handle that process each year. I believe Kate may be able to shed some more light on how to do that. Just one comment from FAMPO's side that Paul, the 125 annually that you're suggesting, we're told by PRTC that's not possible in terms of the rules of allocating a specific regular annual amount. It has to be tied to specific projects, which means that every year I have to come up with a list of projects that are specifically transit planning or TDM planning, route planning or service planning. Those are the only things that I'm allowed to apply for, I'm told. And so I can't even apply for a 125 annual amount. It has to be a specific project amount tied to a specific project. So each year I have to come up with projects. I can't request a blanket amount as is being suggested.
Hey, Ian. So I wasn't aware of that. I know there was the 50,000 kind of for the transit planning, basically, in the FAMPO UPWP last month. I think there was a proposal for that. Like, is this new information?
I'm not sure at what point the information became available, but we were told very specifically, I think it was in the initial presentation that Bob made to the GWRC board on what is an allowable 5307 expense. He went through a very long presentation at the GWRC board the previous month, and I think the comments were contained in that particular presentation that FAMPO projects that can be funded through 5307 have to be specific transit or TDM route planning or service planning, and that those projects, the funding has to be allocated to a specific project. FAMPO can't apply just for an annual allocation. I believe it was in Bob's presentation to the GWRC board.
Ian, you are correct. Only the actual direct providers can do the quote unquote billable hour type approach, but it has to be, and even we are obligated and limited to ADA planning, fare policy, and route planning. Random selection of planning activities is not permissible. 5307 is organized and designed around capital-oriented projects. Only through congressional action or FTA rulemaking have they allowed activities such as route planning, fare policy, and ADA planning services around it. So you attempting to use that for blanket services. If you do organize a planning activity that is, a defined program and project, that is where it is listed under the program of projects. So you are absolutely correct in your understanding of that, Ian. So hopefully that clarifies it for the group. And again, efforts to say I'm going to try to cover these costs with 5307 will never work. It has to be a defined project in advance, put in the program of projects, approved. It has to follow all the protocols. So cost recovery out of 5307 really isn't a conversation. You can talk about it, but it's not a doable reimbursable. Hope that helps.
Thank you for that clarification. I guess a follow-up question, though, basically with the FAMPO UPWP, there is a transit planning kind of item, and wouldn't there be kind of set kind of projects or tasks within that might be 5307 eligible for FY22?
It's a carve out, and it would have to be identified in the UPWP. Again, the program of projects, it has to be carved out of what those activities are, and you're limited to transit planning activities. So routes, not transportation planning, but bus turning left, bus turning right, specific activities surrounding transit planning, fare policy, and ADA services. So it's not a broad-based scope of planning activities. It really is targeted toward these things. And that was done through congressional action or FTA rulemaking to slightly loosen the restrictions of 5307 funds. The core purpose of 5307 is capital infrastructure. It is permissible in maintenance areas, but since GWRC doesn't operate a service, this really doesn't apply. But you can also use it to reimburse for maintenance activities, but again, it doesn't apply. So the loosening of the core purpose of 5307 funds, it is the chapter 53 subsection 07. This goes all the way back to the Reagan administration, and it was the clamp down of using federal funds for non-capital activities. Non-capital activities should be provided, and this is policy, should be provided by the locality. If the locality doesn't want to pay for it, then fine, don't do it. So 5307 is to buy equipment, and that's pretty much it, or facilities. Since the 1980s, it has been gentle loosening of those rules and regulations, and you can map the sections from the 1980s, and like 1983 is when they loosened it for reimbursable of maintenance. The 1990s is the loosening when it applies to the ADA and when it gets into fare policy and transit policy. So you can map the evolution of the utilization of 5307 funds based on congressional action over time. So it really isn't a broad-based philosophy of transportation planning. It is a capital and facilities fund that has been gently loosened to support the activities surrounding major policy shifts over the last 40 years. So that's just a different way of thinking about 5307 funds as opposed to a revenue source. Think about it instead as a capital funding program that has been gently adjusted to allow some new activities to fit into the mold. And I think that'll help with the understanding of 5307 funds on the longer term.
Yeah, that's definitely helpful, and I wasn't suggesting that there would be kind of general transition planning kind of items. I was thinking more just specific transit TDM planning items, but this is a potential example with the GWC strategic plan for GW Ride Connect that has to be done this year. The FAMPO staff using the transit kind of tasks within the UPWP. Our understanding is they're going to do some technical analysis and other analysis to support that plan. Is that something that would be 5307 eligible potentially?
It would. That's really GWRC would have to submit the materials, and then we would vet the information. And if it's permissible and it's out of their funds, then it would be authorized and included in our program.
This is Kate. My understanding is that the planning dollars under 5307 really is for transit route planning. It's a very specific definition. Maybe Bob can clarify that, but my understanding is that we wouldn't be able to use it for kind of general TDM strategic planning. It has to be really specifically transit route planning.
Correct. So TDM activities, depending on what the general nature, if it's coordinating to transit activities, et cetera, there may be a loosening of that. But really it is about, is bus turning left? Is bus turning right? So again, broad-based transportation planning does not fit in the mold. For example, we have 2 dedicated TDM staff members. They are not funded through 5307 and they are not 5307 eligible. Our localized strategic plan was not 5307 eligible. So if you're doing a route redesign, 5307 eligible, but it's not part of a strategic plan. It's about buses turning left, buses turning right, very specific. It evaluates fare policy. It evaluates your paratransit program. It has to be transit based. Again, you can do route redesign programs, you can do those kinds of plans, but they, again, have to be in the program of projects and not retroactive, just for guidance and understanding.
Bob, this is Jason from Stafford. I just have a question. I had understood at one point that what was happening with the funds, the 5307 funds coming from PWR or from PWR, from you all, PRTC, geez, it was, that they were not actually 5307 funds anymore because of what you all were doing with, I guess, for lack of a better term, swapping them with operational funds?
That was a misunderstanding. 5307 funds are 5307 funds. Once they're allocated, an organization can choose to apply. So we might have 10 different things that are eligible for 5307 funds, but it's a finite pool. It is not an. So if we receive, an example is $1 million, but we have $5 million in eligible expenses, we can choose internally and organizationally where to apply those dollars that benefits us best. So you don't have any kind of swapping activities of, oh, I'll do this instead of that. This is just like a locality that receives, let's say, $1 million to build an intersection. Well, you can adjust that for smart scale. You can apply that to smart scale. You can apply that you can put that and swap out the general fund. You can apply that to a state project and ask the state to process something different. So it's not a case of where it's not truly 5307. It is 5307 funds, and it is a program eligible. The $1 taints the pool in that you must spend it exactly on a 5307 eligible project, and you can't do it retroactively. You must do it in advance. So when you list that program out, you know you're going to spend it. We happen to use that dollars in a different way, and I think it was just misunderstood and mischaracterized. So it is absolutely a 5307 fund being spent on a 5307 eligible project. Hope that helps.
This is Paul again. That is very helpful. For the East-West mobility study that GWC is doing, that is 5307 eligible, right? And that is going to receive some 5307 funding for the FY22 UPWP?
That is my understanding, determined by the planning staff or our grant staff. And it's because it ties to direct mobility and development of transit patterns within the program. If it was only looking at truck transportation, et cetera, it would not be eligible. If it was looking at parking, roadways, traffic lights, go see federal highways. This is an FTA funded program, Federal Transit Administration. And that is the core concept behind the 5307 funds. So unless you're doing specific transit-based planning programs, you can have some side topics, but the core must be transit-based and how that program fits into the bill.
Yeah, that application, we specifically went back with that application to specifically use it for only one portion of the East-West study, and that's only for the transit portion, where we will, as recommendations in that project, look at route planning. So it's a very, very narrow specific portion of the East-West study that we can use those funds for, which is why it's a small number. We didn't ask for a large amount because we know we have to apply it only to one specific portion of that study. So currently, the East-West study only has funding for transit. We do not have a cent yet from any grant or any allocation for the roadway portion of that study. All of the funds we've received or been allocated so far are specifically for the transit portion, and this specific amount is only for the transit. When we get to recommendations and specific route planning, that's where we're going to use this 5307 funding, because it's the only part of that study that I believe is applicable to 5307.
Correct. And so, and I really, because this call is predominantly planners, staff members, et cetera, really want to drive this home. 5307 is a capital program. It is about rolling stock. Does it have tires? Does it have walls? If the answer is yes, 5307. If the answer is no, kind of don't even think about it. And the reason I say that is because if you don't have tires and if you don't have walls, then you don't have the transit programs. So the things that we get to apply on 5307 that aren't capital are supporting things that have tires, or let's use VRE as examples, rail, rail lines. But are you building something? Are you buying something? Does it apply directly to the thing that you're buying or building? All transit funded. And then you can have planning activities, but those planning activities are going to be tied to those things with walls and those things with tires. If it doesn't fit the bill, it's not going to be eligible. And it's a very straightforward, when you think about it as I'm buying rolling stock or I'm buying facilities. Now you're in business, buying or building. And the loosely adjusted things that support those two activities. So where, again, I gave the example of a bus. Is it turning left or is it turning right? It's not about, well, where should the future of transit be? That's not about a bus turning left or a bus turning right. The actual object, that's the core. So if you're thinking about building a facility, having the broad-based site planning, not eligible. Once you decide to build a transit-based facility, now you can have applicability and eligibility because now you're doing site planning. Selecting where you're going to go, local money. Doing the NEPA requirements and doing the construction, now you're federally eligible in that program. So it really is a very 5307 is designed to be around things you can touch. And that's one of the things that I've observed with GWRC and FAMPO. At the board level, it's looked at as a funding stream. It's not a funding stream of activities. It's a funding stream of things. And it's imperative that we at that staff level drive that home, that it's very limited funding and targeted toward tangible activities and projects. So that's why, like, the VRE program decision, perfect. You're buying your building, putting the radios on FRED. These are tangible objects you're buying your building. It's not about the planning activities. And that has to be something that the two organizations, as they work together to get out of the quagmire, have to understand at that core functional level. So sorry for my soapbox moment, but it's something that's come up for the last 9 months, and it's important that we all understand and we drive that home, because quite frankly, it keeps getting in the way of decision making downstream because we're trying to push, well, maybe we could use 5307 funds for that. Most of the time you can't. And it keeps creating barriers for the ability to advance programs and projects. And as Ian described, he got a handle on that and is funding a narrow portion of it. If he was trying to deliver the whole East-West mobility study, waiting on 5307 funds, it would never, ever, ever happen. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Thank you for that clarification. This is Paul from Spotsylvania. So just going back to my original point, though, with the 5307, there are some transit capital requests that could still be made. Basically, one is basically with the Brook VRE station, requesting that remaining amount of funding, which is a little over $500,000 for 5307 for that. And then for basically the FRED bus projects, basically the 3 buses, I know is like 1.632 million.
Correct. And again, those are exactly things you can, it has tires or rails, and it's things you can build. It's things you can touch. So they're going to be eligible by their very nature.
Yeah, so I'd say the things that are eligible, I guess I'm wondering if there would be support at the TAC to make a recommendation to GWC on those items.
Which financial year are we talking about now, Paul?
Well, I mean, for the Brook VRE station, it would be FY22. I'll say with the Fred project and basically the leased parking spaces that I mentioned before, that kind of is out in the future. But just those projects, I think, are not necessarily even on the list of projects for GWC to consider. So those could be added. I mean, with Fred, it's the 3 new transit buses, and then it's the trolley bus.
So this is Kate. I'll just jump in here. So as Ian mentioned earlier, I think the next step is for the GWRC board to really start thinking through what the process for allocating 5307 funding looks like moving forward. So that's going to be a several month process to kind of figure out what that looks like. And then, you know, my vision for that is at that point there will be a call for projects. So that's kind of when, you know, anything that's not been submitted could be submitted to get on the list, so to speak. And then, you know, to your point, Paul, I think it's something for the TAC to consider, you know, if they want to make a recommendation to the GWRC board or in some way, you know, endorse projects. That's certainly something that the TAC could do. I'm not sure that it makes sense to do it at this stage just because, you know, there's still multiple steps between now and the GWRC board making more allocations. But that's just kind of my 2 cents. So I'll leave it there for further discussion.
Hey, Kate, this is Paul again. I just had a kind of follow-up question with that. Basically, with the future year kind of funding, I completely get that, like for FY 23 to 27. I'll say kind of with the Fred buses, that I think was more of a FY 27 request, as well as the leased parking spaces. So that could kind of be on a kind of a later time frame. But with the Brook VRE station project, that's something that would need to be done sooner. So normally, kind of like with the FY 22 funding, basically, I was thinking with FAMPO, with the CMAQ and the STBG, I mean, the normal practice is to fully allocate that. And I guess, I mean, with GWC, wouldn't it make sense to allocate some of the FY 22 funding now because we're kind of almost at FY 22?
So I will say that the dates are a little bit of a misnomer. So we PRTC is just now finishing up the next round of allocations, which we're calling FY22, but it's really federal fiscal year 21 dollars. Anyways, the timing is wonky, but that gets allocated
Right, and
to. Yeah.
in case
Sorry,
to add
go ahead.
on, it's not only the federal fiscal cycle, Congress tends not to even act on time. So for example, you may have FY 22 eligible dollars, which of course are allocated in October of 21,
Is
but
this just the normal
frequently,
process, or is this because
yeah,
of like federal transportation reauthorization or the infrastructure bill that's slowing things down?
no, it's just Congress. Think about how many years go by where they don't have an approved budget, where they're doing continuing resolutions for the next 3 months. Then I mean, federal shutdowns. I mean, when you think of all that federal gridlock,
Is anyone there?
you guys
Can you
hear me?
hear us? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I don't know what you didn't hear, but this is just the routine cycle of Congress. They tend to run behind, even in a good year, 45 to 60 days. The federal budget cycle is supposed to be approved by September 30th, effective October 1. If you look at how many times we've had federal shutdowns or budget delays, continuing resolutions to, okay, the Congress is negotiating to approve the budget and they give a 13-day extension or a 90-day extension, that is all that process. It is very common that they just pass continuing resolutions until February or March. And then they do the apportionment. So until they do the apportionments, then you can't actually technically apply the funds. So if they're acting in February to formally approve a budget, then those February funds are applied retroactively to October 1. There's been a continuing resolution to fund at the equal level, but you don't have an actual funding distribution and allocation plan. So only until they pass that budget does it go backwards. So, you know, so it's not a hardcore localized cycle of the FY22 budget starts July 1, ends June 30. Then that's why there are the loosened guidelines on when you can spend dollars, the timelines to appropriate or obligate, and actually close out grants. So there's a whole separate federal process that goes with this that is really different. So you don't have to have a rigid FY22 timeline. If you want to get a tightened list of protocols, eligibility programs, some kind of structure to allocate funding, you can do that. The advantage of doing that is you spend the funds more quickly. If you're doing big broad-based projects like VRE station improvements, they're doing the legwork already. If you just basically give them the nod through some type of general funding program, like, hey, we have acted to allocate this, they can get the work done, but you're drawing money down retroactively. So you don't have to be as proactive as you do at the localized level when it comes to the federal funding allocations.
So I'll say kind of what we're calling FY 22 5307 funding is if that was not available to some point late this calendar year, I think that could still work for the timing of the VRE Brook Station projects. So I guess I would come back just to the TAC potentially making a recommendation if you did receive basically to support that for the remaining amount, which is I think a little over $500,000.
Am I confused? When I'm looking at it, I think Brook was scheduled, the funds were scheduled for 23. Maybe I'm looking at the wrong document.
The 2.2 million basically that GWC allocated basically at its last meeting was all kind of previous funding, what we're calling FY21 or before. They did not allocate any kind of 22 or 23 funding.
Okay, yeah, I think I'm assuming what you're trying to do is to put the funding on Brook to offset what is currently proposed to be FY23 CMAQ.
Yes.
So the funds would be there prior to when the CMAQ would be needed right now. I would think the VRE would be fine with that. I'm assuming. I mean,
Adam with FAMPO. Christine has made a comment in the chat that she would like to make a comment. Christine, do you have your microphone on? Christine, we cannot hear you. I can give you a dial-in number if you'd like, or if you want to type your comment into the chat, I'm happy to read it for you.
I do want to mention one thing. This is Bob Schneider again. I am bailing at 10:30 for a conference call with Senator Warner's office. So if you do have any other additional questions, I believe Joe Stainsby will be on the line. He can gather any other additional information after the fact, and then we can get answers as necessary. But I hope we've driven some of the key points home for the benefit of all of us.
so I guess while we're waiting for Christine, this is Jason again. My primary concern at this point with, although, well, I guess maybe we can get a little more clarity from Christine here, but I'm not opposed. I don't think we would be opposed if it's possible to make that adjustment to free up those CMAQ. But you know, we've been making a lot of decisions, or been trying to make a lot of decisions over the past year a little bit blind because we really haven't understood. We've been asking a lot of questions about 5307 and some of these things. And we don't really have a process in place right now within GWRC to oversee the distribution of those funds. And I guess while I think that the GWRC board made some good movement the other night, if in general, I would say, unless there's a really
followed by the pound or hash sign.
Unless there's a really pressing need, I don't know if it's possible to just wait to make these decisions until we have those policies and procedures in place.
And Jason, this is Kate. That's exactly what I proposed to the GWRC board, that we go ahead and make these initial allocations because there was definitely some movement to do so. And I think the overall outcome was very positive. But for future allocations that we, go ahead and take the time to set up a process that allows all projects to be considered and, has some sort of objective mechanism for making these decisions, so that there is kind of some objective way to do that, and also that everybody knows what the process is and it's very transparent. To your point, that everyone understands what the process is and that it's accessible to everybody. So,
and correct me if I'm wrong, Kate, but you said that all of the prior year funding was distributed?
Yes, all of the funding that we have been made aware of to date has been allocated at this point. I know that PRTC is working on what our next round of allocation amount will be, but I have not yet received those numbers. Hey, Christine.
Hey, sorry about that. I kept calling Alex's name and I was wondering, like, why is he not responding? But I guess there's something wrong with my mic. It was showing that it was on my computer. But thank you. I appreciate sending the call-in information. I did want to make some comments regarding the discussion about potential additional 5307 funding that GWRC could allocate to the Brook project. And VRE is supportive of that, but I just wanted to remind folks of one of the issues that we've raised before, and that has to do with the match that's required for 5307. My understanding is that the money that was recently allocated comes with a soft match that's provided through the FAMPO program, but that future year funds may not have that soft match. And in that case, there is a 20% local match that's required for 5307 funds. If the match is not provided through GWRC for any VRE projects, station projects, the jurisdiction where the station is located would be responsible for that match under VRE Operations Board policy. So I'd like to clarify before any recommendations are made, any issues related to the match, who would be providing that if there's additional 5307 allocated for VRE projects.
Right, and that's really, Christine, that's a brilliant point that I failed to really point out. So one of the things we like to do is we like to try to use 5307 funds to cover program activities because you're doing cost recovery. But when you're doing construction or you're buying an object, buying that bus, buying that rail, building that facility, it does come with a 20% price tag at the local level. And thank you, Christine, for calling that out, because we as the planning group tend to think of, okay, we're doing cost recovery. These aren't 100% funds. So if you don't have it budgeted and if you don't have the match lined up in advance, you're actually it's actually technically a rule. You're not permitted to apply for it. You don't end up in jail over it, but you can do a program adjustment later. But it's expected if you put the 5307 funds in the project that you have the match money lined up in advance. FTA does not like to allocate funds and the grant if you don't have the match funds, because then you can't pay for it. And then you're tying up their money that could be used somewhere else for a project. So just keep that in mind as you bring things forward. You have to have that 20% available. And a reminder, you can't use federal match for federal match. So if you're trying to do a project and you've got some federal highway money that you want to flex over, it is impermissible to use federal match or federal money to match federal projects. So.
And this is Kate. I'll just add on to that. So Christine's correct. To date, all of the funding that has been allocated to GWRC to then allocate to projects has come with the soft match, but each year we'll need to clarify that with PRTC to make sure that there's an available soft match for those dollars. So, to Christine's point, we don't know yet the next round of allocations if that will come with the soft match or if the project owner will have to put up the match. And so that's something that we'll need to figure out through that whole process and make very clear to everybody when they're applying for funds, what the strings are that come with that.
Right. And along those lines, a lot of people don't understand what soft match is. I'm sure this group does, but just in case, soft match is a policy initiative in which the federal government has made the decision that in order to encourage certain activities, they will give you in-kind credit for those activities. So in-kind credit. So if you're doing a capital project on the federal side, and let's say the city wants to build a transit center, that's usually the great example, and the city already owns property outside City Hall. If the city gives up the property, that's considered an in-kind match. If the city says, hey, we'll engineer and plan it, that can technically be an in-kind match because they are doing the costs that would normally be built into 5307. Remember, going back to the conversation, if they're doing a study of where to site it, it's one thing. If they're doing we're going to build it right here and we're going to offset those costs, that's an in-kind match. So what the feds have done is the feds have identified, look, there's certain activities that we want to encourage, such as the van pool is a great example. They want to build off of the van pool and TDM programs. So in order to incentivize the development of that program, which can be difficult, cost prohibitive, a lot of communities don't have van pooling. We are unique in the DMV in that we have such a big program. What they will do is in order to encourage that, they will loosen the restrictions and give credit such that activities that fit categories X, Y, and Z are the equivalent of hard cash. And that's where that soft match concept comes from. It's very narrow. It is not up to us as to what can be included. This is being established by the federal government staff to say, these are activities we want to encourage, and therefore we're going to give credit not only in the raw money, but in the soft match, which is almost money. And what that does is it allows you to then convert nothing in terms of actual bookable revenue into matchable revenue. You don't get extra money for it. It just waives your localized allocation. So you don't have to bring cash to the table, but you're still only going to get, so for example, if it's a $1 million project and you're doing localized match, you're bringing 200,000 to the table and you have 800,000 in federal money. If you're doing soft match, you're bringing nothing to the table, but that $1 million is now 800,000. So you don't get extra federal money. You just aren't obligated to bring it to the table. And again, it is a very, very narrow band.
Yeah, and this is Christina. I guess just to clarify for the Brook project specifically that's been brought up, if that FY22 money that's been referred to is allocated through a call for projects process where you would make application for that funding, unless PRTC could confirm that, or CWRC could confirm that a soft match would apply to that funding, VERI would look to Stafford County to provide some sort of commitment and documentation or resolution by the board to commit to that match before we would submit an application for that 5307 money.
This is Paul from Spotsylvania again. So just going back to basically the 2.8 million, basically the Leland and Brook projects, basically all the discussions we had kind of prior to this month, we're all assuming that that entire amount would be kind of allocated for basically 5307 to kind of basically free up that amount of CMAQ for basically local projects and the CMAQ STBG process. I'll say at this point, would there be the possibility, given that it seems like it's maybe a little tricky to go back for the request for the 500,000 or so from FY22 to basically make a request to GWC to revise the action from last month, to do the full 2.8, to do basically the FAMPO East-West mobility study, and then to also commit to the FRED project for the radio project, but basically to do the balance of the FRED project in FY22, so that it wouldn't delay just the process of trying to basically come to a regional solution for basically the CMAQ and the STBG funding for FAMPO.
This is Kate. I would like to hear, I think FAMPO staff has worked really hard on integrating the allocations that were made into that CMAQ STBG, draft allocation spreadsheet that they have. So I think that we should hear that before we talk about going back to the GWC board for more allocations. I think they're probably presenting something that, will work for everybody.
All right, I think we've had a pretty lively discussion, I guess, on the 5307 funding. So, Kate, I'm going to take your suggestion. Let's go ahead, Ian, if we don't mind, just kind of move into the discussion on the CMAQ and STBG FY22 to 27 allocations.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. What we're going to do is just, I think, go through these presentations so everybody can see what exactly we've done. And then we can deal with requests and other things on the back end of the presentation. I think it's good that we all are on the same page before we start making additional changes and recommendations. So as you know, GWRC board allocated 5307 funding in the amounts that have already been discussed. 2.2 million in CMAQ is freed up. Staff has developed an updated draft allocation outlay in order to, and I just want to say up front, we are using the policy that we have. And remember, the policy that we have is the original policy that was developed prior, even I believe, to Paul's time as the FAMPO administrator, plus the TMA adjustment, which was made as an amendment to that policy over the course of last year, which was largely done before my time and was then approved during my time. So that's the policy we have, and we've applied that policy. So the steps we took in line with that policy is we fully funded the Route 1 Market Street because the policy committee specifically approved a resolution to fully fund that project up front. So we've done that. Secondly, we followed what is becoming MPO best practice to allocate a small reserve so that when the cost of projects goes up and we're informed by, say, VDOT that a particular project is going to be more expensive, we've got a little bit of wiggle room. So we've used 5% there. Then we've allocated funds to progress a project to the next phase before adding new projects. That's in the methodology, and we've applied that particular rule. And then we've allocated the remaining funding based on project score as one item. Also, application priority. Our different jurisdictions told us which are their highest priority projects and various factors that are already there in the policy. Thank you very much. Next slide. These are the funding adjustments that were brought about by the change in available funding, which we were informed by VDOT. Nothing much we could do about those. Those were given to us as this reduction of, I think the total is 2.8 million, roughly 2.7, 2.8 million in reductions. There you can see where it happens. Next slide. we swapped the Shelton Shop Road improvements because this particular item, it wasn't known at the time that all the applications came in that this Shelton Shop Road would be funded in Smart Scale Round 4. So we did a swap on that particular project because we agreed that each jurisdiction could submit 3 projects to be scored and included. Next slide.
Yeah, and that's the last slide. We can go into scores.
Okay, now I'm going to hand over to staff who are going to go through the draft allocations, the scores, the draft allocations, and then the outcomes as we followed the policy. And then we will deal with questions and other matters at the end of that. So I'm going to hand over to the staff to go through those items.
Hey,
Good morning, everyone. Oh, go ahead, Adam.
Jordan, just a minute. We just got a note in the chat that audio went off. Alex, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. I didn't lose any connection.
Okay, I'll just refer anybody who might be having audio troubles to the chat where I put the phone number and the dial-in number. So if you need to connect via your phone, go ahead and do that. Jordan, back over to you.
Thanks, Adam. So on the next slide, we're going to reiterate the process that we use to score these projects. So as Ian mentioned, we used the methodology that was approved in February this year that included the benefit to the TMA measure. And then these are the projects. Oh, go ahead, Adam, back to the next slide. Yep, thank you. These are the projects that were applied for CMAQ funding, and this includes the swap of the Shelton Shop project with the Lay Hill Road project. And these are the applications that were submitted for STBG funding. And so again, like last month, we have the review of what each project was, what funds it was applying for, and then the overall scoring. And so I'd like to note that a lot of these scores have changed significantly from the initial draft scores. This is because some of our methodology requires sliding scales. So based on certain measures, there's a sliding scale. So with the addition of the new Route 1 Lay Hill Road intersection improvement project application, some of these scores have changed in accordance with the sliding scale policy written in our methodology. And so finally, these scores are listed out by improvement type for CMAQ and STBG, and these project scores can only be compared to projects in the same improvement type category, and these are separated out on the CMAQ and STBG slides. I'll turn it over to Adam for the allocations.
Great, thanks, Jordan. I'm going to go ahead and present the updated draft allocation scenario that we've been working on over the last week. So by way of reference, we talked last month about sort of our option B approach, which we were calling for all intents and purposes our stopgap approach, because we didn't know what was going to happen with potential changes to budgets, as well as the GWRC board and what they may do with the 5307 allocation. So as discussed earlier in the meeting, they did allocate $2.2 million in 5307 to the 2 VRE UPCs that are line number 13 here on the spreadsheet. And so we have updated allocations accordingly. So I'm just going to give a summary real quick of kind of the approach that we've taken, and then we have included some documentation in the packet as well, and then we're happy to take questions at that point. So the first point, again, is that the allocations were made for 5307 on line number 13. So we have adjusted the other funding, which is the text in black here that I'm highlighting. And so there's about $500,000 that is left in CMAQ funding for FY23, and the VRE station improvements, and that is specifically for the Brook project. We've also moved previous funding as well as FY22 and 23 to fund the US Route 1 and Market Street project that Ian talked about. We have consolidated a couple timeframes. So there were a few projects in the sort of stopgap option B allocation outlay that we presented last month, where we would have a couple jumps in the fiscal years where a project wouldn't have any funding, say in FY24, but would in 25, just based on how the numbers worked at the time. So we've consolidated that a little bit. We've also used the FY27 funds to essentially backfill a balance entry for all 6 years of the program. So again, this speaks to the number of requests that we've received from localities over the last few years, where if the VDOT cost estimate increases, we want to leave some of the balance. And so this is approximately 5% of the overall budget for each of the program years. We've allocated FY27 funds to an existing project first. Again, as Jordan mentioned with the, as Ian mentioned, with our methodology, we're required to look at that first before adding new projects. So we have funded Onville to where it advances to fully fund the right-of-way phase based on cost estimates that we received from the applicant. And then we have allocated FY27 funds to new projects based on scores and the priority order submitted by the applicants, as well as the amount of other funding available. So that's sort of the step-by-step high-level approach that we've taken here. I'll say that in a perfect world, we would, of course, like to have been able to present this last month so that we could have a month to really go through this with a fine-tooth comb, look at any potential issues. We didn't quite have that luxury given the unknowns with the funding amounts that were available last month. So we had to wait until this past Monday night to start working on this. And so Jordan and I and the team have spent quite a bit of time on this, but all of that being said, this is still a draft for consideration and review, of course, by the TAC. So with that, Ian, I'll turn it back over to you in case you have any final thoughts before we open it up to the group for discussion.
Thanks, Adam. We have now done two things as a start. First of all, we prepared what we're calling the B option, which we presented to you last month, because we had to make a plan to make the funding gap whole based on what we had available. And we presented that last month. It shows how we have adjusted funding to at least not have a deficit. Then what we've done now is using the existing policy, which we have, and the various factors that go to make up allocations. We've done an allocation, as you can see here, including the 2.2 million that was allocated by the GWRC board to the various projects, particularly the Leland and Brook Road project, which freed up CMAQ and RSTB funding, which we've now included here, and allocated to projects according to the methodology that we have. Subsequently, we have had an email this morning from Paul from Spotsylvania suggesting that we need some more time to consider all of the information that was sent out on Wednesday last week with the agenda, and also a range of questions about particular items and so on. And the request that we do not approve this today to give more time for that. So in terms of process, Mr. Chairman, we're in your hands, but our suggestion is if we follow that path, that we today recommend the option which we showed you last month to the policy committee as a stopgap measure, and that we then ask for a second TAC meeting, perhaps on Friday this week, to go over all of the questions listed by Paul, and possibly that questions we're going to get from Stafford and from the city and from Fred and so on, and that we deal with that at a second TAC meeting to properly answer all of the questions in a timely manner. Alternatively, we can do our best to answer the questions today. If you think that we will have the time to do that today, we available to answer those questions as well now. But in terms of process, Mr. Chair, that's up to yourself and the TAC to decide what process they wish to follow.
Okay, well, I'll kind of open it up, I guess, the floor for any kind of other comments first before we move to take any action.
Hey, this is Paul. Go ahead.
I'm adding up all the different numbers, and I'm coming up with a discrepancy in, you know, whether or not the Brook and Leland projects remain fully funded. So before there's any action on the specific amount to remain for CMAQ for the Brook and Leland projects, I'd like to clarify that because there's a number of funding sources for those projects, and I'm just trying to get, and VERI breaks them out as individual projects, whereas FAMPO groups them together. So according to my calculations, that 499,654 may leave the project with a slight unfunded balance. So I don't have those numbers right now. I'm trying to add them up now. So if you have any information to clarify how you arrived at that, I'd appreciate it if you could provide that.
I'm going to ask our staff to clarify how they calculated that particular number, but it sounds like you would want to follow this up with further questions, but we'll just go ahead and explain what we've done there, and then you can follow up again, or perhaps you want to email us after the meeting, or as you like.
Yeah, if I can email you, I mean, I will put together a breakdown of all the different funding sources based on VRE records, and then send it to you, and I'll send it to Kate as well. I mean, I think part of the issue is that the discussion at GWRC had talked about 1.4 million being allocated to Leland, and that's not quite the exact amount of CMAQ if you're looking at a one-to-one swap. So I'll provide a breakdown, and maybe that will clarify all the numbers better going forward.
Hey, Christine, this is Adam. What we essentially did was took the amount that was allocated by the GWRC board, which I think, as you mentioned, is not exactly one-to-one. It's a little bit more of an approximation based on what the actual CMAQ balances were for each of the fiscal years in the program. But what should be the case is that this number with total allocations should be the same. I'm going to pull up a spreadsheet that reflects where we were before we added the 5307, so those two numbers should be the same, and if they're not, we can go back and check our math. So I've got 28,955,126. Okay, so yeah, we can get into the spreadsheet with you, Christine, offline to go back through and make sure we get that number.
Okay. Yeah,
right.
because there's just too many numbers for me to try and do it on the fly now, and then I'd rather take a little bit of time after this meeting and just confirm what our records are, send it to you guys, and just make sure we're all on the same page.
Sure, we're happy to do that.
So this is Paul. We have a lot of questions and just some concerns about kind of what's been done with this. We acknowledge, we understand that FAMPO staff have been doing a lot of work with this, and there have been a lot of changes basically in recent days, kind of in the information that came out late on Wednesday, which we saw for the first time on Thursday. We think that a work session on this, maybe next Monday or at some point later this month, would make sense. But I'll say that one of the big issues, though, is basically not having the full 2.8 million basically from the VRE and the Brook station projects in the 5307, so that CMAQ basically would be freed up for other local projects. So I guess we would like to investigate that, and that's something that basically with the GWC board meeting would be at the end of the month, would be on a later schedule. I mean, one proposal that we think could work is that basically the VDOT request was basically to kind of come up with a solution to address the shortfall, basically in the time frame of this month. And the Plan B option that was presented last month for the FAMPO meetings, that could be put forward for that, which would allow then more time basically later this calendar year maybe to work through the CMAQ and STBG allocations. I'll say just for our projects, it's not necessary that basically the allocations be finalized in in a May timeframe, kind of for those future projects that were submitted, basically for additional funding for CMAQ and STBG.
If it's helpful for the group, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the sort of option B that we presented last month, just so folks can take a look at that.
Adam, would it be possible that you could just give us the highlights of what would happen if we did option B and what would happen if we wanted to proceed forward with the draft allocation that you have in front of us today? I'm a little, there's just a lot of numbers. I don't know if you can tell us in general which projects are moving where and fund.
Yeah, Jason, I can do my best there, and I'll ask Jordan to correct me if I misspeak on any of these. But basically, option B, which again for everybody's reference is what I have pulled up right now, is meant to fully fund or keep projects fully funded on a like-for-like dollar amount basis, despite the budget decreases in FY22 to 26. So what we did here, again, this is what was presented on April 12th, was take the FY27 funds and essentially backfill the program to the extent needed and leave what we can in a balance entry for FY27. So both programs would be about $200,000. And then we have about a $43,000 balance in FY23. So the total funding amount for every project on this list is the exact same. It's just going to be different for each program, CMAQ and STBG, year by year. So we had a lot of movements up and down where one project would have to donate to another based on the amount of funding available for that year. This also does take into account fully funding Route 1 and Market Street, project number 22. And this does not put funding on any new projects at all. So this is the project list, all 30 that were part of the 21-26 program. And again, we use the FY27 funds to simply account for the budget decreases that we presented earlier for each year of the program. So that's a summary, high level of option B. I'll say too that the 6 projects where we moved funding around, again, same amount, but where we moved funding around were Route 208 and Lafayette Boulevard, project 29 in Spotsylvania County, Onville Road, project 28 in Stafford County, Idlewild VCR Connector 27 in the city of Fredericksburg, Enon Road in Stafford County, and then the Route 3 improvements in the city of Fredericksburg. And then the only project that received more funding, again, in accordance with what was done last September, was the Route 1 Market Street project number 22. So that's a quick highlight for option B. I'm going to switch gears and go back to option A. And again, mention what is different from option B. So what this takes into account, and like Christine pointed out, we'll need to massage the numbers a little bit to make sure they're exact here. But the CMAQ is freed up to the tune of about $2.2 million on the VRE station improvements. And then we use that as a starting point. So we instead of creating option A off of option B, we sort of went back a couple steps to use the CMAQ that was freed up in the VRE projects as the starting point. And then we go in accordance with the couple bullet points that I mentioned a few minutes ago, as far as fully funding Route 1 Market Street, consolidating time frames. So Enon Road is an example there. So we initially had funding for Enon out in 26 or 27, so we moved that back up. We backfilled to leave a balance entry here. Again, this is all option A, what we presented for the first time today. And then we put more funding on Onville to advance it to the next phase, and allocated the remainder of the funding to new projects. So there's some funding going to these 4 projects that are new on the list. That's option A. So with option B, there's no new projects, there's no new funding. We just backfill to account for the budget decrease. Whereas on this one, we do add new projects and put new funding on the list in accordance with the scores, applicant priority, and other factors.
So this is Ian. I think if we take the point made by Paul, option B would be effectively a stopgap measure. We're saying approve option B to give us another month or so to go through the option A calculations, questions that have come up, etc. And we will still intend on approving option A with any amendments that are deemed necessary. But option B is a stopgap measure just to fulfill the requirement that we have a plan to not have deficits, and we then approve option A as soon as we're able to.
Jason, I guess I'm a little concerned about piecemealing this out too much. I think I would prefer we either move forward with option A today, I mean, it's my opinion, but or consider, holding a follow-up meeting instead of trying to break this out into too many small decisions. Just the ideal to kind of, I think, come to one resolution that we recommend to, the boards. Otherwise, I think it just gets really confusing.
If we could have a follow-up meeting in the next week, we would still probably, I don't know, Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but we would still probably be able to recommend option A to the policy committee if we have a second TAC meeting, say on Friday or Monday, to give everybody a week to go through all of these things, submit questions. We can then meet as a group and go through each of those items and then still approve it, provided we publicly advertise it as a second TAC.
Yeah, and that's definitely possible, and I think that might be our recommended approach to the TAC, again, just based on how many variables are in this and how much new information we've had to come across over the last week.
Yeah, this is Jason again. I think with the TAC, what FAMPO staff has done with option A seems like a really good opportunity overall. It seems pretty balanced. I think we probably need a little more time to digest it maybe and have some other questions ferreted out. Sounds like there needs to be a little bit of work with VRE to massage that one number. But I think we can make ourselves available later this week or whatever to try to come to a final consensus.
So this is Paul. We definitely kind of favor kind of having a follow-up meeting basically on just this later this month. I guess we do have concerns though that just some of the questions that we have are ones that we're not sure that they will be able to be resolved at this meeting because it kind of involves things that involve GWC. So I guess I would say that it would be good to meet, but we don't think that kind of the final version of option A for this should necessarily go to FAMPO for approval in May.
Well, maybe it would help if you just listed the items that would require GWRC board approval, and then we will understand what you're meaning by that.
Yeah, sure. So the big thing is with the 5307, basically for the two station projects in Stafford, for Brook and Leland, the full 2.8, basically kind of all the regional cooperation that we've basically kind of been discussing for the last several months was all predicated on basically that full 2.8 being available. Or also whatever the exact amount for that is. I know it's close to 2.8, but not exactly 2.8. And I think kind of just answering that question would be helpful just to resolve this. And basically for the VDOT requirement, kind of the the option B would basically satisfy that for the time being this month. I'll say basically, if there was additional funding available, that would kind of obviously impact the allocations, and it would be something that would be good for everyone. I'll say basically, I will kind of throw out a couple kind of comments and suggestions just kind of on the current option A. One issue is basically with the FY22 funding. You should be able to fully allocate that. We completely get that it's good to have a reserve for basically the future years, but the FY22 funding, that is a set amount that's not going to change in the future, and we think that that full 125 could be allocated. We have some questions regarding the project scoring. I'll say our biggest question is with the safety measure. We think it would be a good idea for VDOT to validate those scores, just because the current scores for the highway projects are not consistent with the data from VTrans that's used for smart scale and the pathways to planning. So that is kind of a request we would like to see done. And I guess there's a question of how quickly could that happen. I'll say the other kind of issues is it doesn't seem like the programming of the allocations actually seem to kind of match the scores that well. It seemed like some of the projects that had high scores received low allocations, and then some projects that basically had low scores received allocations. And I guess we didn't really understand the rhyme and reason of that. That didn't seem to follow kind of a practice of kind of using the scores to inform the programming allocations for the projects.
Paul, I'm happy to address that last point, and then we can talk about the others. I think that one thing that FAMPO has done historically is put all of the CMAQ and RCP applications together on one list, which I think is a little bit counter to the language in the methodology. So we are required for the methodology to evaluate, and I'm reading here, all projects according to the criteria for each project category. Staff will then prepare a list of candidate projects that have been scored and ranked in each category. So what we've done very explicitly and very carefully this year is provide a final score where each project category is its own respective list. So 95 in one place is not better than an 85 in another place. So you can only look within each project category. So we don't normalize scores across different improvement types. So we take that into account where the score, again here, this is a good example for the Fred project, an 80 in this category, per the methodology, we cannot say it's better than a 65 in this category. So there's a bit of, you sort of have to analyze the scores in total. You can't just say that one number in one category is better than a lower number in a separate category.
This is Jason again. I'm not really clear what, and Paul, maybe were those the three main issues you had, or four? I'm kind of lost track.
Yeah, I guess the issues are basically with the 5307, basically in kind of the swap for Beery, that's one. There's questions with the scoring, which the major one basically there is with the safety. Basically, then there's the issue of basically how the scores were used to do the programming process, which I guess is certainly a major change from the way it happened kind of last year and has occurred in the past. And I guess I would have to kind of look at just the prioritization methodology and basically just kind of even check that out. But I mean, I'll say that certainly that was not the intent, the way that was put together, and that is not the way that basically FAMPO has done it for the last several years. And then I guess the last thing is basically with our Exit 126 project, the proposed funding doesn't meet the schedule.
This is Ian again. We do have an answer in terms of that safety metric. There's, I think, a little misunderstanding of how the methodology specifies we should do the safety calculation. And Adam, do you have a slide or something that, well, actually, can you bring up the line item in the methodology that speaks to safety for that particular item, because we just need to check what the methodology actually says. And
Yeah.
it doesn't specify how the calculation should be done.
Yeah, Ian, we don't have it in the packet, but I have it on my other computer. But it's just 20 points to the highest to the project with the highest current crash rate / number of crashes. So it might not be exactly what VTrans uses. So we're happy to publish all the little calculations that we use in developing those scores. And I think what I proposed, Paul, too, to the questions and comments that you sent over this morning, we can send that out along with some of our responses that includes information such as the language and the methodology that I referred to, how we came up with the safety scoring, so that everybody can see that in one place, so that if we can meet on, say, Friday or Monday to take action, that everybody has all of that in one place to take into account.
Mr. Chair, this is Jamie Jackson with the city. So I guess where we are right now is we are fine with moving forward with an alternative date if that meets everyone else's schedule at this point, without us having further conversation. And I know we will with the next meeting, but we are in agreement with the option A. But again, we're happy to dive into the numbers a bit more, make sure that everything actually reflects what is actually occurring. I'll also say the reserve balance, I think, is important because I think with all of these projects, there will be some issues that may be minor, but may prevent a project from moving forward. So I think we're okay with the reserve balance. And I believe it was Kate who said earlier, if we are to go to option B, until there is an identified strategy that's agreed on from GWRC board, we would go with the recommendations for GWRC staff unless GWRC approves something different. So you've already identified a process that you want to go by for allocating additional funding. So we would just probably support that because there's no other clear methodology or practice for allocating any additional funds. So again, we're fine with meeting. I'm not sure how much further we're going to advance during that meeting because right now it just seems like we're clarifying numbers with VDOT for those fund allocations. So I just want to make sure that if we are going to meet on Friday or Monday or whatever the date is, we're very clear about our outcomes once we leave this meeting, so we don't go down some, I'll just say, a rabbit hole on any items that won't change as a result of options A, B, or C. Thank you.
This is Jason. I think I agree with what Jamie's saying. And I have two questions, one for Jamie and one for Paul. Jamie, well, I guess the question for you all would do you think Fred would be interested in taking the bus replacements and trying to get 5307 on that instead of CMAQ? That's item or number 34, I think, on that list. That's one question. Then for Paul, the question is, I'm still not clear. It seems that what you're suggesting is to go back to GWRC and kind of redo what they did the other night with the with the funding, and I'm not really clear on what or what it is that you're asking to do. I think we're getting a little bit complicated there, and that's my opinion, but I'm not. Maybe you can clarify. Thanks.
I guess my question is, what is the best way to try to get the full 2.8 million, basically for the two station projects, basically in Stafford, for the 5307 to be placed on them? And I guess I had originally thought that maybe a request for FY22 funding, that would be the best option. It sounds like that there are some challenges with that. So with that being the case, it seems like maybe the best option would be to go back to GWC with a request to redo the action last month, to do basically the full 2.8 for basically the VRE first, and basically to commit to the FRED project, the balance of that in FY22. I mean, that could be a solution that could work. And then once that's done, we can go back to the FAMPO, CMAQ, and STBG and basically make the allocations based on the available funding.
But I think, and maybe Kate could speak up here for a minute. I mean, can't we come back at a later point and tackle that FY22, 23, 5307 question with Brooke? Maybe, I mean, we don't have to do that before making these decisions.
Right, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, timing wise, my understanding is that the FRED radio project is very time sensitive and they're getting ready to start on it now. I know that Jamie's already reached out to PRTC to get the ball rolling on, getting that 5307 funding ready to go. The VRE projects, Leland is slated for FY24 and Brooke is slated for FY28. So to Jason's point, I think it actually makes more sense to look at allocating the remainder to the Brooke project, at a later date. I mean, I don't think that it's complicated to allocate additional 5307 funding to the Brooke project. It's just not something that's going to happen immediately, but I think that FAMPO staff has put together, a solid solution in the short term, taking into consideration the additional 5307 allocations that were made last week, and then, there's always the option to then allocate additional 5307 funding and free up CMAQ funding at a later date.
Well, this is Alex. I think based on the discussion we've had today, I'd like to make a motion to recommend the TAC reconvene, I think on Monday, May 10th, to kind of follow up and have a follow-up discussion about the possible CMAQ STBG allocations. That could give FAMPO some time to go back and review some of the numbers from their spreadsheet and make sure we got that all correct as far as the numbers there for the VRE stations, and then provide some time to, answer some questions Spotsylvania may have about the scoring and see if we can work those out.
So I'll say that next Monday we're available at 9:30.
Is that okay with people from our 3 jurisdictions and Fred? Can we just clarify that everybody is available at 9:30 on Monday?
VRE is free.
Yeah, it works for Stafford.
I have a conflict, but we'll make it happen.
Thanks for being available, Jamie. I appreciate that. Mr. Chair, just to clarify, we're going to have a meeting of the TAC on Monday at 9:30, and we're only going to have one item on the agenda, which is having a look at the CMAQ allocations and any matters related to those allocations.
Yes.
This is Jason. Is there a way that prior to that meeting, we can get a full list of whatever the questions are from Spotsylvania, and because I'm still not sure that I understand your concerns, Paul, to be honest, and I don't really know why we're delaying this action.
Jason, this is Adam. We're happy to include that documentation in the packet, and we will have that out by Wednesday afternoon at the latest.
No audio, guys.
Yeah, Adam, this is Jamie. I'm going to agree with Jason. If we can be very specific of what we're going to talk about and what we're actually going to vote on so we can move this forward, because I'm a little bit unclear too, because I'll just be frank at this point, I would just vote for option A. So I'm not with the obvious modifications for funding piece. So yeah, if we can get very clear direction so we don't spend a significant time over the phone if we don't need to.
This is Ian. If there are any other additional questions to the ones we've already received, if you could email those to us today, we will undertake to make a list of the questions that we've received, and if possible, we can prepare in advance answers or numbers that we think apply to those questions, and we can send it out with the agenda for Monday's meeting so that you all have questions and hopefully the best answers we can come up with before the meeting, so that you don't go into the meeting not having that information.
A technical thing, but I don't think there was actually a second for Alex's motion.
So this is Paul. Basically, our audio went out, so I guess I would want to ask him, what are we trying to second?
It was the motion that Alex made for the meeting on Monday.
Yeah, just to defer action on this item.
Meet at 9:30. Second, Spotsylvania.
All right, well, I think we got a motion in a second then. I guess let's go ahead and take a vote. All in favor and continue the discussion for Monday the 10th? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Let's move on to item 7D, the 2050 LRTP update. Ian?
Yeah, Alex, there was an item back under 7, like 7.4 or C4 for resolution 2129. We support that.
Yeah, sorry. Let's go back to that.
So, Mr. Chair, this is Adam with FAMPO staff. This is a resolution for the annual allocation of CMAQ funding for the leased commuter parking spaces program. This is the UPC that was grandfathered in since it was before 2009, I believe. This is for $17,000 in CMAQ for the 3 lots within our region. And this is just an administrative requirement.
All right, is there anyone have any discussion about this item? All right, hearing none, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Okay, now we'll move on to item 7D for the 2050 LRTP update.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. What the first item in your pack is just the 2008 highway prioritization methodology for your reference. The second item is our draft prioritization methodology, which is the document that aims to bring together all of the individual prioritization and scoring methodologies that you've been seeing over the past few months. So the roadway item, which was approved by the policy committee, plus the transit item and the bike and ped prioritization scoring methodology. This document sees to bring all of that together in one place, so that you now have one document which lays out the methodology of how the whole process will be handled. So I'm going to hand over to Adam to take you through what we've prepared, and this is the draft that's presented today. It brings all of those items together in one place.
Thanks, Ian. You covered most of my bullet points. I think the only thing I'll add, just in the interest of time, is that don't be thrown off by the page count. Most of that is the appendices. We included the existing methodology as well as the Smart Scale technical guidance for everybody's reference in this document, but the main content is only about 23, 24 pages. We do spell out sort of at a high level the process by which we're going to go through, at least for the first iteration this summer with the 2050 update. And then going back to what we've talked about a little bit over the last few months is that we want to use this as a basis for a more comprehensive update to the CMAQ and STVG prioritization process later this year. So did want to make that note, but we are asking for approval of this document. Everybody has seen the transit TDM measures as well as the active transportation measures. At this point, I can go to any point in the document if anybody has a question, but again, we are asking the TAC for action today.
All right, does anyone have any questions or comments on the methodology? All right, well, hearing none, would anyone like to make a motion to approve the methodology?
We're all exhausted.
This is Jamie Jackson with the city. I move that we approve the methodology that's presented. Someone has the second, so we can move forward.
This is Kate Gibson. I second.
All right, motion and second. Is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor then say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is there any opposed? All right, then motion passes and the methodology is adopted. What we got next on our list is the call for projects.
Yes, we have just a couple notes, Mr. Chair, on the call for projects and the revenue projections. As far as the call for projects, if the policy committee approves the updated methodology this month, we intend to reissue the 2050 Lrtp call for projects shortly thereafter. Approximate time frame that we're working with right now is from May 21st to June 21st. And as discussed before, we do intend to keep all of the 2045 projects on the constrained list that are there now. This call for projects will be for new candidate projects. So we are working with the assumption, a safe one, albeit that the projected revenues that we are working with and still receiving from TAC members will meet or exceed the 2045 constrained lists. So this will be for new candidate projects. And then I'll say just a couple points on the revenue projections I included in the packet, the email that we sent out back in January, and it was right about this time that we slowed down the development of the 2050 Lrtp a little bit to focus on the new scoring methodologies that we've been talking about quite a bit. So this is a reminder, if you have not already, to go ahead and submit to us your 2050 projected revenues if you haven't done so. So we do have numbers from Fred, from Spotsylvania County, and VDOT. Everybody should have, shortly after this email that we sent out in January, a follow-up to each respective agency or jurisdiction that has either a template or what you submitted in 2045, sorry, for the 2045 plan for reference. So if anybody would like to set up a meeting to go through the details of this, please let us know. But again, this is just a reminder and wanted to include this in the packet.
All right, is there any further discussion regarding that? It sounds like Stafford owes you some information there on the 2050 funding, so I'll work to get that to you here shortly.
Thanks.
All right, well, let's go ahead and move on to item 7E, which is the 2050 Lrtp amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are looking for approval. This is in public comment right now. I think that this has been in the TAC packet the last few months. We did make a couple minor adjustments to cost estimates for some projects in Stafford County, but this is what the TAC has seen as of last month, and happy to take any questions before, again, asking the TAC for approval today.
Yeah, Adam, did you receive any comments or questions on this? I'm just curious.
Any public comments, Paul?
Yes, yes.
We did receive one. I'll let Stacy correct me if I misspeak here, but I believe that there was someone who provided a comment last week in support of the Lafayette Boulevard multimodal project. And I want to say the Route 2/17 improvements that I believe are funded via Round 4 Smart Scale, but to my knowledge, those are the only comments that we have received to date.
Thank you.
I have that to read if you want to hear it exactly. It was Lafayette Boulevard improvement and support for the Tidewater Trail widening.
Sounds good.
All right, well, if there's no further discussion or comments, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to approve the 2045 amendment.
Second from Paul from Spotsylvania.
All right, is there any further discussion? All right, I'll take a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, amendment's approved. Next, we'll go to item 7.
Mr. Chair, this is Ian. Just before we move off of LRTP items altogether, I just want to reiterate, Adam did make the point, but I just want to reiterate, jurisdictions please need to start preparing their LRTP new projects for submission during that window period that Adam indicated. We don't want you to be caught at the last minute not having your projects ready to submit. So please do start preparing your 2050 LRTP new projects to submit to us. There's a lot of deadlines coming up, as you'll see in the next 2 months, and we don't want anybody to miss out or rush their projects at the last minute.
Ian, can Adam repeat what that deadline is?
Sure, Christine, we are looking at hoping to have all of our projected revenues to work with so we can do all the math by June 1st. So we're given about a month from today.
Okay, I thought Ian mentioned a deadline for submitting new projects.
Sorry, for the call for projects, we're looking at May 21st to June 21st. So we're not going to reissue that until the new methodology is approved by the policy committee. They are scheduled to meet on the 20th. So we're looking at 4 weeks for the window for submission, but you can start working on that now.
Okay, yeah, you said May 26th through June 21st?
That's what we're working with. It's not set in stone, but that's what we're hoping to do.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Adam, this is Paul. Basically, for that kind of submission, is there a form that we need to fill out for that? Or do we just give you a list of projects?
Yeah, there is a form so that we can have some accessory project information to work with as we build out our regional database that we've talked a little bit about with the TAC. So I will make sure that that gets posted on the website and sent out to the TAC. We have a couple adjustments to make to it from when it was last updated in 2019. So as soon as that's ready, we'll post that, even if we can do it a couple days before we open up that window.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, let's move on to the item 7F for the TIP update from Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As presented last month, we received a request in mid-March from DRPT to add STIP ID RACS001, which relates to paratransit vehicles. Currently, this project is receiving 100% federal funds and doesn't require a local match. And this project does not require air quality conformity. This project is currently in a 30-day public comment period, which will conclude on May 20th. And we're looking for approval for this to be added and then seeking board approval at the end of the month. Any questions or comments?
This is Paul, motion to approve.
This is Alex. I'll second that motion. Is there any further discussion? All right, well, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? All right, looks like that one passes. Next, we'll move on to item 7G, which is approving the FY22 UPWP. Adam?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple quick comments here again in the interest of time. The only update really since last month is that we have been notified by DRPT that they are including our grant request in the draft SIP for the East-West Mobility Study Phase 1, which will focus on the transit portion of that study. So we have been notified of that. No other updates since last month. One small minor thing with funding, we did separate out the CMAQ into federal and state in accordance with all of the other funding streams here. And again, this is in public comment, and we are asking for approval on this as well for the TAC today.
Yeah, Adam, this is Paul. I had a question just with the East-West mobility study, given that kind of there's the additional 5307 funding for that, will that be kind of added to the final version of the UPWP?
Well, that is a great question. We are intending to add that. So I'm trying to scroll up to the section where we talk about the studies. We will include that. That will be part of the phase 2 effort. So we will include that and just mention that we have been allocated 40,000 and 5307 for the budget here.
Okay, great.
Just a comment on that study, all the funding we've received so far, as I said earlier, for the East-West study is only for transit. We don't have any funding for the roadway portion, but we're proceeding with the transit phase 1 study as we have the funding and it's in our program.
Hey, Ian, would the roadway portion, would that come then later, or are you trying to do that kind of next fiscal year as well?
Well, we've included it in here without specific funding allocated to it. If we get the funding, we would then need to go and do an amendment to the UPWP, I suppose, to indicate that funding. I have asked VDOT to look around to see if they can assist us with finding, again, a smallish portion of funding to fund the roadway portion of that study. But we have called it a phase 2. In a similar way that the Lafayette Boulevard had a phase 1 and a phase 2, and we would not intend to start it also now at the beginning of this year, but we were looking in calendar year 2022, depending on when we get funding and when all the arrangements are in place. So we've put it in here as to be decided in terms of the actual funding allocations, but the 40,000 that we've got in 5307 can only be used for transit route planning, which is the final part of the transit portion of the East-West mobility study.
Thank you. I'll say, this is Paul. I'll make a motion to approve.
Jamie Jackson, second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, that one gets passed. Next would be a 7F, a little smart scale update from Ian and Kate.
All right, good morning. So I'm going to start off by just talking kind of at a high level of how FAMPO staff and GWRC staff have kind of thought through our approach to Smart Scale Round 5 and what we kind of want to kick the conversation off with today. So again, from a high level perspective, we're hoping to look at Smart Scale Round 5 really as a joint FAMPO and GWRC effort. For a few reasons. One, FAMPO staff and GWRC rural transportation planning staff are the same folks. So we're really hoping to streamline this process and have these conversations all at once versus separating out what we do for our GWRC localities versus our FAMPO localities. And then ultimately, you know, FAMPO Policy Committee has to approve a list of FAMPO Smart Scale projects, and the GWRC board has to approve a list of GWRC Smart Scale projects. But the GWRC list can include projects from the 3 FAMPO localities, as well as projects from King George and Caroline. So because ultimately we're going to come up with these 2 lists, but they are obviously related and can have projects from the same localities, we want to make sure that that's coordinated. And so what we present to FAMPO is informed by what's being presented to GWRC. So just at a high level, that's kind of how we've been thinking about this. I'll let Ian speak more to the specific timeline. I think the other thing to note here is that we've been having conversations with VDOT about kind of lengthening the timeline so that there's more time for feedback and all these different steps that need to happen to get to that final pre-application submission. So I'll turn it over to Ian to talk about specifics, but that's just kind of at a high level what we were trying to accomplish. Thanks.
Thanks, Kate. Yeah, so we have been in discussions with VDOT, who I think are on the line now anyway, to propose a timeline for Smart Scale Round 5. And I think the thinking from VDOT's side is that we need a little more time to be able to do all the background work that needs to be done for the project. So the request is that we lengthen the timeline, as you can see on the slide in front of you, to be able to give VDOT's technical team a little more time to provide the technical assistance in making these projects ready for final submission. So this is really a rough timeline that VDOT and ourselves as the staff believe would be helpful in that process to give us a little more time to do it. So we're starting in May now with initial discussions, reminding everybody what the process looks like, the timelines we're suggesting to look at, and then, as you can see, develop preliminary lists of projects in June. But this is going to be reviewed multiple steps through the process, as you can see, as time goes on. But by starting a little earlier, it just does give the technical staff additional time to prepare all the, if engineering drawings are required or technical documents are required, sketches and so on that have to be added to the applications. Those could be done. I believe last year there was a crunch towards the end when everybody was trying to get projects in, and it was difficult to get it all done in time. So this is the timeline we're proposing, the list of steps we're proposing, and we wanted to give it to you up front early in the process so that we could make sure that everybody is, again, prepared. And again, just look at the dates for submitting preliminary lists and final lists. We're again encouraging jurisdictions to start thinking about their Smart Scale Round 5 applications so that they have, from all of our jurisdictions and entities, projects ready to go at the appropriate time when we do issue those call for projects. So that's
Ian and Kate, this, Paul, I have some general questions, and I think it's good that kind of this schedule is out there. This is helpful. I mean, just a suggestion, you might want to also basically add the schedule for the application submission, which I'm guessing that would be something like August of 22, just to add that to this as well. A couple comments, basically one, and as you know, a lot of the potential candidate projects for Smart Scale come from studies. I'll say that some of these studies are still ongoing. I'll say basically in the Spotsylvania case, we have kind of with the city, we have the Lafayette Boulevard study going on, and we don't know exactly when that is going to be completed. We also have a Route 1 Masponics kind of corridor study going on, and that's the same kind of situation. We don't know exactly when it's going to be completed. Maybe it will be completed this summer. But I guess in terms of this time frame, basically for both of those projects, we would think we would have probably a regional project from each of those. But I guess if you were to ask us, like in June, what is the specific project you want to do, let's say for the Lafayette Boulevard study, I'm not sure we would be able to tell you because I'm not sure if the study will be far enough along. So I guess the question is there some flexibility with this that we could say we want to do a kind of a project from the Lafayette Boulevard highway study with the city, but we don't know exactly what we want to do yet, kind of in a June timeframe, and maybe we kind of have the answer to that in September. The other question with this is that September 21 kind of a date for the request for VDOT assistance. Is that a VDOT deadline or is that a FAMPO or GWC deadline? And I guess if it is a VDOT deadline, does that also apply to the localities?
Paul, thanks for the questions. In terms of The timeline in June and those two studies that are continuing, I'm happy to take input from VDOT, but we could in June, for example, put a placeholder title and whatever else if that study is only going to be completed, say, in July. There is some flexibility in that. The point is that VDOT, I believe, is, and they can speak for themselves, but I believe they're very keen to start preliminary work early. So if there's a project going to come out of the Lafayette study and we can't give the exact intersection or roadway portion in June, I'm sure that'll be fine, and we can add that in July and August as those studies reach final recommendation. But I'd be keen to hear VDOT's opinion of that. We'll gladly add the final date on the end of the diagram as you've recommended. And the request for VDOT assistance round one, you'll see if you look through that, that is an initial request for assistance. There's going to be additional assistance later on in the timeline as well. But I'd be keen to hear VDOT comment on all of that as well.
This is Stephen. You stated it very well. I think back to well, there's several things there. One of the things Paul mentioned with these studies that are not complete. Historically, we've not had a problem with that. Normally, if we have studies that are nearing completion in this phase, you'll have some idea, having worked, as one of the stakeholders, as to what the recommendations are going to be. So we don't have to actually get to the point where we've published the study before you already probably have a pretty good idea of, what types of projects, are being recommended, and what they would cost, and those sorts of things. Maybe certain ones that you'd want to package together, but there is flexibility there. We're not trying to rush that process, but I think we'll have enough information soon enough on both of those studies that you mentioned, Lafayette and the Route 1 study in southern Spotsylvania. The other thing, as Ian pointed out, the request for VDOT assistance on as you can see in the September timeframe there, it sort of spells out, descriptions, sketches, estimates, those sorts of things. I know with the localities to whom I'm addressing now and the FAMPO GWRC, you guys do a lot of that yourselves, but we still have to, go back and virtually review every last detail of it to make sure we have the absolute best applications we can. And so it really is in the interest of just giving everyone enough time to, do those the very best we can. One other thing I want to point out is, as you consider projects, and we're going to have our locality day very soon with each of the localities and the MPO. So this will be something that we'll discuss at that point, and that should be within the next month or so. We're actually having a meeting today internally to talk about that. One thing we do want to emphasize is that project readiness, as far as smart scale, it requires supporting documentation in the form of some sort of an analysis normally. Those are the things that need to be considered as quickly as possible, because they take time too, and some of them can occur concurrently with some of these other processes. But we don't want to get behind and then not be able to complete a necessary study, even if it's just an intersection analysis of signal or whatever type of analysis it might be. It is that project readiness that will get things screened out if we're not on target with that. So that's really more driving this, kind of having your project selection, certainly there's flexibility, but having as much of that determined up front will help us and you to make sure that all these, I's are dotted and T's are crossed before we get there and it's too late.
Mr. Chair, I don't think there's any particular action required on this. We just wanted to start the process, introduce everybody to the fact that we are well aware of Smart Scale Round 5, that we've started discussions with VDOT. We've drafted a preliminary timeline so that everybody's aware of what's going on and can begin to think about projects they would want to submit. And this is just the preliminary introduction to this item. We will discuss further as time goes on.
All right, thank you, Ian. Yeah, I think this is a great idea, like you said, to kind of start teeing these up before the pre-application update deadline sneaks up on us. So I think we're all on board there. So let's go ahead and move on to item 7I, which is the community engagement and equity plan update from Stacy.
Yeah, thanks for hanging in there, everyone. I know it's been a long meeting. So I wanted to give you some information today about a document that we have out for public comment. We're not asking you to endorse this plan today. You'll have a chance at your June meeting, but it's quite a long document, so I wanted to help you become familiar with it between now and the June meeting so that you have the information you need to endorse it. So what I'll be showing you today is our draft community engagement and equity plan, which is now out for public review and comment. Next slide, please. So let's just start by explaining what equity is. I've had this question a few times. It's often confused with the term equality. So equality means that something's equal, whereas equity means something is fair. And there's a graphic there to kind of show you the difference. With equality, everyone's getting the same exact crate to stand on to see over the fence. With equity, barriers to see over the fence are lowered by providing everyone with the exact amount of crates they need to see over the fence. So equity is about lowering the barriers to participation by giving people the resources that they need to meaningfully participate. Examples of this might be providing language translation services or providing communication in a written form versus verbal form. Also making sure meetings occur and events occur when public transit service is available. Next slide. The purpose of this plan. So this plan satisfies and exceeds federal requirements to have a Title VI, which is a non-discrimination plan, and also a public participation plan. You should be familiar with both of those documents because FAMPO currently has both. It made sense to staff to create one master plan and put the Title VI in there as well as the public participation plan in there together, because as you do the work, you'll notice that they overlap greatly. You can't have one without the other. And so we were constantly going back and looking at both plans. This way we have everything in one place. We did ask VDOT if this was allowed, and they did say, yes, that's fine as long as you have separate sections. So we've done that. This plan strengthens transportation decision-making process by making sure that the public has a meaningful way to participate, and also that we're providing you all with public comments in a timely manner. And it's also a plan for staff to follow to ensure that all members of the community have an opportunity to meaningfully participate. We're required to do that. And for committee members, such as TAC, it's also a written policy documenting what FAMPO should be doing. And it also, there's a small section that provides the public with resources, and it also serves to make FAMPO procedures transparent to the public. Next slide, please. So what the plan contains, there's several sections. This gives you a great brief introduction. First section contains an overview of the federal non-discrimination laws and procedures that FAMPO follows. Another section conveys the actions that FAMPO takes to comply with those federal requirements. There's another section for staff that we'll use. It conveys our goals and strategies, which we use to bring the public into the decision-making process. There's also a section that conveys a method for staff to develop, document, and evaluate community outreach efforts. And finally, there is a small condensed section that serves as a guide for the public, which explains the importance of public participation, and it also allows them to understand how they can influence the transportation planning process and gives them some resources for that. Next slide. This is just our vision statement that we've developed for the plan. We've not had a community engagement and equity vision statement, but we will now. It also conveys 3 major goals for community engagement, and that's effectively reach, teach, and continually learn from community members and other transportation stakeholders, particularly those who are traditionally underrepresented in civic processes. The second is to communicate community and stakeholder input early in the decision-making process. The third regards communicating back to community members how their input influenced the decision-making process. Next slide. So those goals came about from focus groups. We conducted 4 different sessions. We brought in several members of the public and advocates for underserved groups, also social services workers. And it was about 22 in total. We met, we passed on our proposed strategies to reach hard-to-reach groups. They provided feedback on those and helped us develop our goals. On your screen, I won't run through every one, but those are the main points that the group helped us to identify. Next slide, please. So if you are familiar with the Title VI and Public Participation Plan that FAMPO currently has, and all MPOs are required to have, I'll just give you some bullet points of how this plan is different, so you don't have to go back and compare the new version from the old version, because essentially they are very different. So first, we've updated and detailed our outreach strategies. We've also provided legal authorities and explained those in the document. We've created a new participation guide for the public to use. We've also laid out a process that will help us plan outreach efforts. We will be updating our community engagement and equity goals. We've provided an explanation of the equity analysis process and purpose. This relates to environmental justice work, how we evaluate the benefits and burdens that our Lrtp and TIP might impose on vulnerable populations. We've also laid out a process for evaluating the effectiveness of our outreach strategy. So we're making sure we're dedicating our time and money on things that actually bring in meaningful community feedback. And again, as I said, this is one master plan that replaces those 2 separate plans. And we also have provisions for staff to make administrative changes to the document and update the data without having formal approval. In the document, it states that staff can make administrative changes. However, we will make sure all committees are aware that we intend to make the changes, let you know the details of the changes, and those will also be included in the appendix of the document. Next slide, please. So as I said, this document's out for review and comment. It started in April, it'll end in June 4th. We have scheduled for TAC to endorse this at the June 7th meeting, and the FAMPO Policy Committee won't act on this until June 21st. And because GWRC is FAMPO's fiscal and staffing agent, they also need to endorse the plan, and they'll do that at their June meeting as well. Next slide. For our public comment efforts, we've put out flyers at all the public library branches. We'll be doing a live stream on Wednesday of next week on Facebook and YouTube in order to talk more about this with community members. Of course, we've done social media ads and posts. There's also an article in the Fredericksburg.today website. We've sent mass emails. Hopefully you all were included in those and have seen those. If not, please check your spam folders and help us pass on those emails to interested parties. We also have a web page with video resources and graphics to show people how to review the document and why it's important to comment. We have not scheduled any in-person outreach, looking for opportunities to do so. Those are kind of difficult. So if anyone has any events that they know of that are coming up, please reach out and let us know if that's something we can participate in. And then finally, there'll be a public hearing on May 20th at the FAMPO Policy committee meeting. Next slide. And then a note on data and maps. When you review the document, you'll notice that Appendix B has a statement that we are waiting for the 2020 US Census data in order to update our maps and demographic information. It's intentionally left out. The statement's just a placeholder, and it's important to note that we will not implement the plan until after we have the fresh set of data and maps included. Is there another slide? Okay, so what can you comment on? You could suggest additions to the stakeholder and community partner list. We'll use that to conduct community outreach and make sure all interested parties are included and aware of community engagement opportunities. You can also let us know if the section that's labeled Guide for the Public is helpful and easy to understand. You can give us your feedback on our proposed outreach strategies. And finally, you can review the section called Overview of Civil Rights and Equity Requirements. Perhaps if you're really familiar with those areas, you might catch something that we've left off, or if we've explained it too confusingly, that'd be helpful to know that as well. And next slide. And that just wraps it up. There's a website link for you there if you want some more information. I'm happy to take questions, but I think that was pretty comprehensive, and I know everyone is eager to exit out of the meeting room, but if you have any questions, please let me know.
All right, thanks, Stacy. I think in the interest of time, I'd like to just go ahead and run into the next one. So Adam, if you could go ahead and give us the update on the transportation alternatives and revenue sharing.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is nothing new, I don't think, to the localities. We just wanted to include this information in our packet as a reminder. We're happy to assist if need be as far as revenue sharing or transportation alternatives applications. Pre-application submission deadline is July 1st for both programs. Mr. Chair, I'll run right into Resolution 2130. This is the federal fiscal year 20 annual listing of project obligations. So we are required as an MPO to publish this in accordance with the FAST Act regulations. We've gotten the information from Lrtp and VDOT as of last week, and we are ready to publish this to our website. So we're looking for action from the TAC and our policy committee.
All right, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion then to approve the resolution.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? All right, hearing none, the resolution passes. Next, we'll move into items 8, correspondence.
Stacy, are you aware of any new correspondence that we've received?
Nothing on the public involvement side, no.
Great. I'm not aware, Mr. Chair, of any new correspondence that requires any attention.
Okay, any staff reports?
There are no new staff movements or changes that I need to report on at this stage. I'm sure you've all seen we've advertised for a position.
All right, great. And then we'll move into member reports. I'll start up here with Stafford County. We just got, one minor update. We just recently hired some 2 new project managers to start over here in our transportation section to help kind of alleviate some of my workload here. So looking forward to getting those guys started and up to speed. And that's pretty much it for Stafford County. If anyone else has any member updates? All right, well, hearing none, since it's already noon, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion then to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 All right, we'll go ahead and adjourn, and we'll have our next meeting on May 10th at 9:30.
See you on Monday.
Yep, thanks. See you.